Vamos a dar paso a los últimos contenidos que tenemos en la agenda el día de hoy. La siguiente intervención es de Shireen de Souza, que en junio de 2021, fue nombrada por el gobernador de California, Gavin Newsom, como subsecretaria de Política Climática y Relaciones Intergubernamentales de la Agencia Medioambiental del Estado de California. Shireen nos va a hablar sobre los avances en la agenda sostenible de este estado norteamericano de California, que como seguramente muchos sabemos, pues están digamos que en la frontera de las políticas en términos de finanzas sostenibles. Adelante, por favor.
Hello, I'm Shireen D'Souza, California Environmental Protection Agency's Deputy Secretary for Climate Change and Intergovernmental Relations. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here and provide remarks. I really appreciate all this forum is doing to advance the discussion on innovative climate action planning, its economic impacts, and the important role of the financial sector. I'm excited to tell you about a major development in global climate action we've been working on here in California. As you may have heard, earlier this month, California's Air Resources Board released its scoping plan, which is now the world's first large economy roadmap to achieve carbon neutrality, economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2045. The plan includes concrete policies and actions California must take to drastically reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and, as I mentioned, achieve carbon neutrality by 2045 or sooner. We have less than a quarter of a century, but the plan is an actionable roadmap to drive the most significant transformation of a major economy since the Industrial Revolution. In 2045, California's use of transportation fossil fuels will be less than 1/10 what they are today. And greenhouse gas emissions from all sources, including industry and transportation, will be cut 85% below 1990 levels. The plan also delivers $200 billion in health benefits and keeps California on track to continue growing the economy and add 4 million new jobs, including green jobs that are increasingly tied to the thriving industries for which California is becoming an international hub. We're excited for the scoping plan to serve as a call to action and a model for other jurisdictions, providing a range of policies that can be exported to address the existential threat of climate change. In addition to the plan itself, we also have unprecedented funding to support the implementation of the scoping plan and equitably build a better future for all Californians. The multi-year California climate commitment totals $54 billion and includes historic investments like $10 billion for zero-emission vehicles, $8.1 billion for clean energy, $1.4 billion for nature-based climate change solutions, and $14 billion for zero-emission transportation, and much, much more. This past year, California also passed a broad package of ambitious climate legislation, including laws that codify our 2045 carbon neutrality goal, set targets for removing carbon dioxide from the air and sequestering it, and create interim targets for our goal of 100% clean electricity by 2045. Additionally, we have laws to help ensure that the transition away from fossil fuels is equitable, including a law that protects communities against oil drilling by establishing a setback distance of 3,200 feet from schools, homes, and other sensitive locations. As you know, California has a huge and diversified economy, so our decarbonization journey will involve unprecedented transformations in many sectors. It's important to examine each sector on its own, but let me touch in particular on two sectors: transportation and energy. Transportation is the largest source of emissions in California, responsible for nearly half of statewide greenhouse gas emissions. It's also the primary source of the local air pollution that sickens disadvantaged communities across our state. Without addressing this sector, California and the rest of the world will not meet our climate targets, including California's carbon neutrality law or our collective Paris Agreement goal to keep global temperature increases to well below 2 degrees Celsius and ideally no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. California has a track record of taking action to clean up transportation emissions, from setting ambitious targets and developing corresponding regulations to investing billions of dollars in zero-emission vehicles and related infrastructure. Our efforts are paying off. Already over 1.4 million zero-emission vehicles, or ZEVs, have been sold in California through Q3 of 2022, making up nearly 18% of our sales share and accounting for over 42% of all US ZEV sales. Our efforts are supported by the budget package I mentioned earlier, $10 billion for ZEVs and $14 billion for low-carbon transportation. And a major focus of our efforts is to address equity by cleaning up the heavy-duty sector, supporting low-income consumers to purchase ZEVs, and locating charging infrastructure in disadvantaged communities. In addition to our budget investments in clean transportation, we also have a suite of regulations and executive orders that accelerate the transition to ZEVs. In 2020, Governor Newsom signed an executive order mandating that sales of new cars in 2035 be 100% ZEVs, and we have since developed and adopted the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation to codify that goal and lay out a year-by-year plan to achieve it. Since the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation was adopted this past August, 4 other US states have already announced plans to adopt the regulation by the end of this year, and we expect more to follow suit, creating the market certainty all stakeholders need. In addition to regulations that focus on electrifying passenger vehicles, we are making sure that medium and heavy-duty sectors are also prioritized, considering their detrimental impact on overburdened communities that are often located near major transportation corridors. California's Advanced Clean Trucks regulation was approved in March 2021 to help ensure that zero-emission trucks are brought to market. And the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, which is currently under development, creates requirements for medium and heavy-duty fleet owners to begin transitioning their fleets to ZEVs everywhere feasible. These regulations contribute to meeting Governor Newsom's goal to have 100% of medium and heavy-duty vehicles be zero-emission by 2045, wherever feasible, and by 2035 for drayage trucks. California is also focusing on ensuring that underserved communities are not left behind when it comes to charging infrastructure. We have a law requiring that at least 35% of EV charging infrastructure investments be located in underserved communities. California now has over 35,000 public chargers, more than any other state, and over 79,000 total public and shared private chargers. In addition to focusing on ZEVs, we also have programs that incentivize cleaner fuels. The scoping plan calls for greater stringency in a low-carbon fuel standard, which will lead to increased investments in clean fuels and enable significant private investment in ZEV infrastructure. We are excited to share our knowledge and ambitions with other jurisdictions and are actively involved in a number of international clean transportation partnerships. California leads the Transport Decarbonization Alliance, which brings together world leaders and companies to eliminate emissions from the transportation sector. We're also a proud member of the ZEV Transition Council, an international forum focused on enhancing political cooperation on the transition to ZEVs. These partnerships help us move toward our climate goals together, making us stronger. Let me also speak for a couple minutes about our work on the energy sector. The electricity sector is currently responsible for about 15% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions, and reducing its emissions is of great importance in its own right. One of the most important components of this year's landmark climate legislation in California was SB 1020, which creates targets for 90% clean retail electricity sales by 2035 and 95% by 2040. And these interim targets set us on an ambitious path of rapid acceleration towards our goal for 100% clean electricity retail sales by 2045. But scaling up renewable electricity is also a vital key to decarbonizing other sectors. As we electrify transportation, buildings, and industry, we'll need over 160 gigawatts of new installed capacity to meet demand by 2045, according to the scoping plan's modeling. That's 7 gigawatts of renewables and 2 gigawatts of storage each year between now and 2045, which means California will need to more than triple its current level of in-state renewable and zero carbon power capacity. We're already making progress towards these goals, though. In 2021, 52% of California's electricity generation came from renewable and zero carbon sources. But what does the future energy mix look like if we are to imagine the 2045 we want? The scoping plan scenario outlines the build out of 72 gigawatts of new utility solar and nearly 30 gigawatts of customer solar by 2045. Meanwhile, the governor has asked the California Energy Commission to set planning goals for at least 20 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2045. In Southern California's Lithium Valley, the co-production of electricity alongside lithium extraction from Salton Sea geothermal brine has the potential to add over a gigawatt of baseload electricity capacity, while producing raw materials critical to reaching our target for 32 gigawatts at battery storage by 2045. The ambitions are clearly high, so how do we achieve these goals? California's approach to meeting our climate targets combines investment and incentives with carbon pricing and other regulations. $2.1 billion of the energy budget in the California Climate Commitment, which I mentioned earlier, goes directly to support the build out of clean energy technologies like offshore wind, long duration energy storage, industrial decarbonization, and green hydrogen. Investments in new capacity build out go hand in hand with regulation. Much of the current progress in renewables development has been made thanks to the Renewables Portfolio Standard and the Cap and Trade Program, both key programs for advancing renewable energy. The Renewables Portfolio Standard sets continuously escalating renewable energy procurement requirements for the state's load-serving entities. The requirements are technology neutral, meaning that competition for the lowest cost build-out determines the direction of renewables capacity. And California's Cap and Trade Program creates an incentive for the finance community to invest in industrial decarbonization, including in the electricity sector. Since industrial actors can sell allowances they don't need, mitigation measures create value assets, which drives investment where it's most cost effective. At the same time, a declining cap on total emissions helps us meet the state's mitigation targets. California has therefore created a market in which industrial decarbonization is a reliable investment for the finance community. Cap and trade has been very successful in this last decade of implementation, with over $18 billion reinvested to reduce GHG emissions and provide benefits to disadvantaged communities. Cap and trade is among the most comprehensive emission trading systems in the world, covering 75 to 80% of statewide emissions, compared to the EU ETS's coverage of 45 to 50% of emissions. California's cap and trade has also been a model for other jurisdictions around the world. The Chinese government consulted with our experts at the California Air Resources Board during the development of China's ETS. And through our feed-in tariff programs, individual Californians and families are participating in the energy transition while saving on utility bills through customer solar build-out. Now, it's also important to recognize that advancing efficiency is often the lowest hanging fruit in climate action. To give one example, heating and cooling buildings is responsible for almost a quarter of global energy use, and California has been leading the way with our Title 24 Building Energy Efficiency standards, which are the oldest in the US. Title 24 standards require that builders apply the best available technology in new construction and have been updated every 3 years since 1978. Through reducing wasteful and unnecessary energy consumption, Title 24 standards have saved California consumers billions of dollars in energy cost savings. The return on investment for consumers makes energy efficiency a no-brainer. So the state is partnering with the private sector to ensure that everyone has access to financing for energy-smart investments. Programs like the California Public Utility Commission's Go Green Financing Program expands access to home energy efficiency upgrades so that all Californians can save money by reducing energy waste. We know that California's clean energy know-how wasn't developed in a vacuum, so we continue to invest in mutual learning and cross-pollination with other jurisdictions. We conduct energy-related technical exchanges, policy dialogues, and workshops with foreign jurisdictions such as Mexico, China, Japan, and New Zealand, and are always interested in opportunities where our experiences can be valuable to others and vice versa. Before I close, I'd like to focus briefly on the financial sector, as I know this is the focus of the conference. It goes without saying that the financial sector provides the bulk of the investment capital required for the transition to renewables, zero-emission vehicles, clean industry and buildings, as well as climate-smart agriculture. I've provided various examples of how state policies send strong market signals in various sectors, rebalance existing markets in favor of renewables, and create new markets. California's experience in employing such market-based instruments to combat climate change has gained the confidence of investors, thanks in no small part to extensive engagement with independent experts, industry actors, and community stakeholders at every step of the process. Examples include ZEV manufacturers' feedback and inputs during the development of the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation, the Independent Emissions Market Advisory Committee's expert advice on cap and trade, and the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee's input on the scoping plan. These thorough consultative processes ensure the investment community that California's policies are fully implementable and have taken into consideration the situation on the ground, including both market realities and community and equity impacts. Jurisdictions looking at California for a model of state climate action should study our consultative process carefully. They often mean the difference between actionable ambition for concrete climate action and unattainable goals, and between equitable climate action and unforeseen trade-offs and collateral damage. Briefly, I'd like to mention a few other facets to the state's government's relationship with the financial sector on climate matters. First, one shouldn't neglect the importance of public-private partnerships for green finance. In California, the California Infrastructure and Development Bank, known as iBank, manages a few examples. iBank's Climate Catalyst Fund helps address the problem of investors' low-risk appetites for new technologies. The fund is targeted to bridge the financing gap that often slows down market development for advanced technologies. It also mobilizes public and private finance for shovel-ready projects that are stuck in the deployment phase. iBank also operates the Climate Tech Loan Guarantee Program that de-risks the lending process for financing high-impact climate tech startups. Secondly, it's important to recognize the California state government's role as a major institutional investor in its own right, given the state management of $700 billion in state employees' pension investments. In 2019, Governor Newsom announced executive action to leverage the state's pension investments to drive carbon neutral technologies and strengthen climate resilience. California's successful track record for tangible progress in climate action can in many cases serve as an export model for other jurisdictions. But policy exchange is never a copy-paste issue, and policy models must be articulated in consideration of local circumstances. This is best achieved through a two-way dialogue. Indeed, we in California have much to learn from other jurisdictions pioneering advances, and our climate partnerships with foreign jurisdictions are often two-way streets for the exchange of technical and policy know-how. Reflecting on the long-standing relationship between California and Mexico, I'm confident that future developments will bring us closer together in climate partnership, and I'm particularly grateful to have been able to share the California story with Mexico's Green Finance Advisory Board. Thank you.